I'm here today with Lori Ladd, who is an ascension guide and a multidimensional channel. She takes the complexity of ascension and grounds it into simple and easily digestible concepts. She teaches on ascension, multidimensional living, and transitioning into the fifth dimension. Lori bridges the gap between us and our family of light, providing deeper understanding of our purpose and our path. Welcome, Lori.
Hello, Meredith. So good to be here with you. It feels so good.
Yeah, I know. It's been a few years since we've seen each other in person, but I was lucky to meet you at our mutual friends gathering in San Francisco years back. And I think that was maybe before you had fully said yes to like your path and what you're doing now. And I'd love to maybe just start with a little bit of that story of like where were you in your life at that time, maybe like 5, 6 years ago, and then just choosing like your dharma and your purpose to be an ascension guide and what that path kind of looked like and see where that takes us.
Yeah, I remember it was like, I don't know, September, October, November, somewhere around there, 2015, I think. Um, or was it 16? I can't
It
remember.
was, yeah, 15
16,
or
15,
16.
one of those years. Yeah, and I had just quit my private equity job that I'd worked at for 15 years as an executive assistant in the city. And I started teaching yoga full time and working on my website and sort of whatever my work was. But at that point, I really didn't know what my work was. It was like, I know I'm supposed to do something. It has to do with ascension, and that's all I knew. But I just started building this website. I started sitting down, meditating, and I started hearing other beings coming through. I started being shown these things in my meditation. I was like, well, this is somewhere else. Where am I? Sort of digesting. I was teaching myself, like, what is this that's coming in as I'm opening up to whatever I'm here to do, which I intuitively knew. I just didn't like physically know how it was going to unravel. And so I started working with a mentor that kind of really taught me how to channel. And I practiced channeling on a regular basis. And it was then that I realized, okay, I'm going to do sessions with people. And I started slowly doing sessions with people. And I was called to move to Mount Shasta. And that's really when it started, at the beginning of 2017. Is really when I went into overdrive, and it was like, okay, you're now in training up here. And that's when the Galactic beings started coming in full force. And that's really when I was like, oh, this is what I'm here to do. Like, connect with these higher dimensional light beings, bridge the gap between these light beings and ourselves, and then talk about what this entire process is that we're doing, which is this physical shift in consciousness. And it just started to unravel quite naturally the more I just surrendered into, okay, what do you guys want me to know next? What do you want me to do next? What do you want me to teach next? And I was in Shasta, so it was a small, there's nothing to do, right? So you're just with you. So not only was I going through my own internal process of like shedding and shadow work and like, dying multiple times over and over and over internally, clearing, but I was also activated and opening and receiving. And it just naturally, like a snowball effect, it just grew.
Mm.
As long as I kept saying yes to whatever they wanted me to do, it just unraveled. And so here I am now back in Mill Valley, channeling these beings all the time. It's so amazing what they give us, and what they are teaching us and reminding us. And it is such a gift to be able to see that perspective, which I love that perspective, because it doesn't help necessarily when you're in the third dimensional perspective all the time, but it allows you to kind of step out and say, oh yeah, that's right. There is something else larger at hand. And that little shift, that jolt they give us is like a, oh, okay. And then we get back into that car, right? Their dimensional, human life, and we're journeying. And then they jolt us. Oh, wait, don't forget, right? So I love that ping pong that it allows me to share with everyone and to experience myself. So that's the short version of how
Yeah.
it unraveled.
Yes. I'm curious, did you feel like it was just this natural ripening in your life of like, okay, now it's time and my gifts are coming online? Or do you think like going to a place like Mount Shasta, which was like a portal spot, really accelerated things? Because I know a lot of people out there who are like opening to their gifts and they're like, when is my time to start like, doing this more? And I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest questions, right? It's like, when am I going to do my work, right? When are my
Yeah.
gifts going to turn on? When am I going to do it, right? And for me, it's unique, right? Like, we're all very unique in our path and in our journey and when things unravel. And based on your Akashic record and what you experienced in your human journey, it's going to dictate sort of how this unravels for you. For me, I was literally forced by my guides to go to Shasta in order to be able to sort of upgrade as quickly as possible to get to work. It doesn't mean that it's better than or worse than anyone else, or that that's the path to take. It's just that's what was guided by me, and I said yes to it. A lot of times when we start stepping into our work, it requires a huge amount of surrendering into an absolute unknown. And a lot of us may not have that ability yet, right? So we have to allow this process of what's my purpose work, what's my role. We have to have compassion with ourselves as to how it's unraveling, where it unravels, when it unravels. And what the guides always say is, you're doing the work even if it doesn't look like you're doing the work, right? We have this idea of, oh, my purpose work is going to look like what Meredith's doing, right? Or what Lori's doing, and you may be doing your work right now, even though it doesn't feel like you're doing your work, right? We want it to look a certain way. When we surrender and let go of that expectation or attachment to how it needs to unravel and look, it actually allows us to be present with what's actually occurring, that we are actually starting to step into our gifts. If you're focused on getting there, you're missing what may be actually occurring right now, right? You may actually have gifts that you're not aware of because you're so focused on the fact that you want to be doing what Meredith is doing or what Lori's doing or what so-and-so's doing, right? And so you're outside, you're external. The gifts are here. If you're trying to force yourself into something or see yourself or push yourself and you're not looking here, the gifts are here. The abilities are here, right? It's all right here, always. And so it's a matter of letting go of, and that's hard because a lot of us are like, yeah, but I really want to be doing it. I want to be doing it. You are doing it. Just come in. Just go inward. I guarantee you, when you go to the grocery store, when you go to the gas station, when you talk to your friends and family, you're probably doing purpose work. It just doesn't look like what you and I may be doing right now, right? So
Yeah.
there's not a booklet that's like, okay, here's how your gifts are going to unravel, right? And a lot of us have there's a lot of internal work you have to do also to really surrender into your gifts or your whatever it is that your blueprint has for you, or that you have designed for yourself. It's not this cookie cutter, like, oh, here you go and off you go and you're doing it, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of other stuff that plays in.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I have to share that I think the last year, 2 years, like I've been feeling so much more internal and so much more just like wanting to kind of retreat from the world. And that's like the natural inclination and probably some internal processes happening in order to prepare me for whatever's next. But it gets hard when it's like you look out everyone else is doing. It's like I want to help and I want to serve and I want to do more. And it's got to come back to just like what intuitively is feeling right in the moment. Do you have any thoughts on that, and just like how to come back into your center, or how to not get so swept up in comparison or any of that?
Yeah, it's huge. It's a big one, especially for women. Um, one of the things that happens, I think, for some of us when we are navigating our awakening and starting to really turn on and come on and get awake and become the observer, is there's a lot more internal work that we actually have to do that we don't want to do. And the more you awaken or sort of open the eyes and become the observer, the more you are guided back in. And the more you're guided back in, the more you are asked, you will be asked most likely to pause a lot more, right? To take moments of silence or not doing anything, because you are learning how to be you. You're learning how to listen to you. You're learning how to receive from you all over again. And we're used to the opposite. We're used to looking out and getting validation out. We're used to getting signs outward, right? Like guidance from external. We're used to everything being external. And what's starting to happen is it's like, oh no, I got to come inward. And then when we start going inward, it gets a lot quieter, right? And then it gets a little bit uncomfortable. Like, well, wait a second. If it's, I'm supposed to be go, 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 go. And it's quite the opposite when you come in, because what you notice is you start moving in a flow state. And when you're in a flow state, you only work when you feel like working, right? You're only producing when you feel like producing, right? Because you're always in that flow state. It's a very different way of being, as opposed to the way we have been programmed, which is all external, all outside of us, not in a flow state, and taking cues from others, taking well, I have to be productive. I have to make money. I have to create. I have to do all these things. I have to get all these followers. It's a force, the opposite of flow. And when you start to come into flow, at least for myself, it's like, oh, you actually do less and you're making a larger contribution when you do show up, right? It's really interesting when we start shifting how we are, when we start holding these higher frequencies. It's like, oh, wait a second, this is not how it's designed to be. And it's like, oh no, this is how it's designed to be. You're just learning the new way of being that we're all going to start learning and being. But it's a little bit uncomfortable, because it's like, it's not the same way that we've done it for so long. You know what I mean? It feels different. Like, and that was for me, those last 2 years, it was a challenge for me, because especially on social media, it was like, if I didn't show up, there was this like, you got to show up, you got to show up, you got to show up, you got to show up. What is that? That's ego. Oh, hello, ego. Ego's saying you have to show up. You have to show up to get followers. You have to show up to produce. You have to show up to this. You have to show up. That's my ego, right? Not higher self. That's my ego, right? And so I navigated that and battled with that for at least 18 months when I was beginning, right? Of like, wait, this doesn't feel good. Wait, this feels good. Oh, I'm going to force myself. No, I'm going to hold back, right? What I've learned in the last year, what I've really settled into, is really beginning to recognize the difference between the ego and the higher self, both beautiful aspects of us, right? But really starting to learn and feel into which one am I moving from. And recognizing that when you come from the higher self, it's so much more ease. There's so much more grace to it, because there's nothing you're trying to get out of it. Like, you're literally just showing up because your heart is saying, show up, right? You're producing because your heart is saying, produce now. And now we want you to go lay for 3 days. And now we want you to produce something again. And now we want you to lay for 2 days. Now we want you to produce again. It's not about, oh my God, you have to show up. Oh my God, you need these many likes. Oh my God, you need this many. It's a very different feeling. It's a flow state or a force state that you find yourself going back and forth in. And it's a, for me, it was a learning process for 18 months, maybe longer, of following that process of ego, higher self, ego, higher self. Neither are bad, neither are good. They just both are. But what intuitively feels energetically better is that higher self flow state, and navigating that. Which is, okay, so ego is a force. Ego is a duality. Ego is right, wrong, good, bad. You better show up. If you don't show up, this is going to happen. If you show up, this is going to happen. Oh my God, no one's going to like you. Oh my God, you're not going to get a lot of likes. Oh my God, you better make sure you're writing that correctly. Oh my God, what are people going to think? That's ego, right? Higher self is like, it's that state of, it's like, this is who you are. This is you. This is your voice. This is your vibration. This is your frequency. This is you. Go shine, right? Higher self is like, just go, just show up and then retreat back. Show up, retreat back. It's like this, there's none of that judgment. Yeah.
Yeah. It takes the pressure off to just really listen to that and to know that it's the ego is the one that's going to be like putting the pressure on or being that mean voice on the shoulder. And it doesn't have to be like that. Yeah, our guides want it to feel energetically expansive to be in the sharing. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So part of why I wanted to interview you today is to go into kind of deeper around like the beginning of time and just like
nice. We're gonna go right there.
Yeah, we're gonna go in. So when I was a little girl, I just like always had this feeling of, what is this? Like, why are we here? What are we doing here? What's going on? What's happening? What is Earth? Like, why? And no one had really answers for that. It was just like this thing that I would hold and didn't really know how to talk to people about. And definitely stepping more into my spiritual paths, things started to make more sense. And 2 years ago, I went to Egypt. And before then, I wasn't as much into or open to the star being the more galactic type of ideas around, how Earth came to be. But being with those temples and starting to learn a little bit more of the history of like Earth and these ancient civilizations, I just really felt like there's no way what they've been telling us in history and all of that is true. Like these civilizations were made by very highly evolved star beings. And that kind of began a research into, watching ancient aliens and like all different type of esoteric beginning of time. How did we really get here on Earth? What is the human race? What is this human experiment? So I'd love to hear your take on this.
Well, I just wrote 100,000 word book
Yay.
all about this. I love that this is where you're going. I had no idea. This is my favorite subject. Nobody really ever asks about this. It's a really long story, but it's also very simple and it's very easy. And it's a resonance, right? So what I share and what I received from the Galactic Federation of Light. The Galactic Federation of Light is like, you know how you have your own set of guides that are with you since the moment you dropped in. We have many different guides that are with us throughout our lifetime that come and go, but we have a set sort of team that we create before we drop in, and they are always with us, right? Again, other guides come, other guides go, but there's a set. The Galactic Federation of Light is the guides for Earth. Earth as a form is a physical body, just like we have a physical body, right? But Earth herself has moved she's a higher consciousness that chose to create this experiment and experience that we're in. So Earth, that we call Earth, is actually a higher consciousness inside this physical ball we call the Earth plane. Okay. She chose to have beings are with her as she created this whole experiment, right? Now, we are in a linear time frame way of seeing things. So it's very challenging sometimes to wrap your head around the fact that this is one of however many experiments that may be happening in some other now moment, in some other system somewhere else, right? So this is not the only thing that's happening in a now moment, but this is a massive experiment that's occurring right now, and it is contained. So the Galactic Federation of Light consists of a couple hundred different higher consciousness light beings. Light beings are basically consciousnesses that are existing in different dimensional fields. And depending upon the dimensional field, it will give it a signature, a way of being, an experience, right? So like Palladians are 6th to 9th. And also, by the way, light beings, just like us, we are, well, our bodies, I should say, our bodies are moving between a 3 and a 5 right now, right? So we don't just stay in one dimensional field. Light beings are the same way. They kind of fluctuate between a couple different dimensions, many of them. So if you connect with a Nocturian, you may connect with an 8th dimensional or a 9th dimensional or 10th dimensional, right? It's kind of, they go like that. So anyway, Galactic Federation of Light, a couple hundred light beings that are all here with different councils, assisting the earth plane and making sure this experiment plays out. So what's the experiment? Why did she want this? Well, when we separate from source as a light, as a consciousness, as a vibrational pulse, we have free will. We get to choose whatever we want. And who knows how long Earth, I'm going to call her Earth or her, right? But it's a consciousness. She chose at some now moment she wanted to experience what it was like to move down into a very low frequency, which is the 5th dimensional frequency, which is form. And she wanted to see what it would be like. Literally, she was just like, well, this is what I want to experience. I want to see what it's like to go from a 5th dimensional dimension into a 7th without leaving the form. So typically, as a higher consciousness meaning not physical form, okay? Anything above a 7th dimension, even 6th dimension, when you are connected to your frequency, your consciousness, if you want to go and experience a different dimensional field, a different consciousness, you intend it and then you move into it. I.e., let's say you're experiencing yourself in a 9th dimensional frequency. And you're like, I'm now done with this. I want to go and experience myself in an 18th dimensional consciousness or an angelic sort of consciousness, right? You just choose it and you're in it. Just like that. That's how it works, right? You intend, boom, you become. So to be able to move into her consciousness down into a form, 5th dimensional form, and then she wanted to be in that form. She wasn't 5th dimensional, right? The form was 5D. She was a higher consciousness. She wanted to drop herself in like a car, like you're in a car. And she wanted to see what it would be like to go from a 5th dimension to a 6th dimension to a 7th dimension in the car. Like, what's it going to be like? I want to experience shifting dimensions in form. So literally, that's how simple it was. That was the beginning of what the hell we are in right now. Like, that's how it began. And there was a design of the earth form to be in 5D. And it had to be designed energetically to hold her consciousness. That's why there's all these grids, these ley lines, there's all these dimensional fields around her, right? Once she was formed, then there were forms designed to be on her so that the forms could experience this as well. She didn't want to do it alone. Let's have other things on me so that they can experience this as well. Now, in a 5D form, in a 5D field, you're not in duality. So you don't have evil, you don't have anger, you don't have greed. Those consciousnesses don't vibrate in a 5D. So she chose 5D because she knew we're safe, we're good, we're going to be aligned, we're going to be connected, we'll have access to the quantum. We won't have amnesia because, again, 5D is a high enough state that you're aware of who you are as a higher consciousness in form. So anyway, long story short, not really though, they created the human body. They created all of this, the higher beings, right? They created all of it. And so they created the human form in a 5D. And they created this amazing energetic system inside the body that would allow the higher consciousness, that any higher consciousness, to drop into it and connect. So we have the channel, we have the energy centers, we have all these meridians that go out. We have the higher self, we have the I am presence, we have source inside that fourth energy center, the heart. We have so much going on in here, right? It's designed to. And so you can call them galactic beings, you can call them light beings, you can call them whatever you want to call them. They're just higher consciousness beings. They start, once the human body was in place and it was able to hold higher consciousness, these, I'm cutting a lot out because it's a very long story, but they're what the earth invited in all kinds of consciousnesses to experience this. So thousands upon thousands of different consciousnesses came into this grid. And they created this 12th dimensional grid around the entire earth and all the entire experience, the entire experiment. So everything and anything that has ever been a part of this experiment has been held in this 12th dimensional grid. And the reason for the grid is almost to create a sovereign field. So everything is contained in it. Now, any consciousness can exit it, but when they exit the grid doesn't open back up for consciousnesses to come back. Now, the other thing that's important to understand is that fourth dimensional beings and fourth dimensional races, which a lot of us may or may not be aware of, they've done a lot of damage to the human form. They did a lot of damage with, hybrid races that were not so great, and alien abductions and experiments on the humans. They existed prior to this experiment, right? But they were outside of the 12D grid, and they were not allowed into this 12D grid. And neither were fifth dimensional forms. So you had to be in a sixth dimensional field or higher. So anyway, these consciousnesses came in, and then they chose to drop into human form, and then they started having human experiences, right? And they started experiencing themselves in a human form, as a higher consciousness in 5D. And the goal was, the plan was to move to 6 and to 7. Well, over millions of years, what eventually happened was consciousness has free will, and they're in a quantum space. And they knew that. And so what happened was they started tapping into lower consciousnesses. They started slowly tapping into 4D consciousness, and more 4D consciousness, and more 4D consciousness. And then they started deciding, wait, I want to create my own sort of fifth dimensional race. Why can't I create my own fifth dimensional consciousness to come in, right? They started creating races that are fifth dimensional. So 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, much higher consciousnesses started creating a race, which is, it's kind of complicated. So they created a 5D consciousness from their higher consciousness. And that 5D or 4D consciousness it is that consciousness. Does this make sense? It's not a higher consciousness. It is 4D consciousness. So we are higher consciousness in a 4D or 3D body, and we'll be higher consciousness, right? We're not 4D consciousness. We're not 5D. They created actual 4D and 5D consciousnesses as beings, as existences. Does this make sense? As opposed to a higher consciousness inside form. So these races were created millions of years ago. And these races are what started to play in the lower consciousnesses. And these races are what started to pull the Earth's frequency down. They started pulling the human collective down, just like we're starting to tap into very slowly higher consciousnesses, right? So we're slowly moving into 4D. We're slowly tapping into 5D, meaning our bodies, right? It's a slow process. It's exactly what happened millions of years ago, but the opposite. Humans slowly started tapping into these lower fields of consciousness. And over millions of years, eventually there were 4D human forms. There were 4D races. There were 5D races. They were playing in denser fields. And when you move into 4D, you move into duality. And then all of a sudden, you've got different dimensional fields existing on the same earth plane, just like what we're starting to see right now, but going up, right? So Earth eventually moved into a very low third dimensional space. And after millions of years. And so now Earth found herself, there was 5D, 4D, and 3D humans on the Earth plane at the same time. And there was massive cataclysm events, massive. So basically, the Earth was about to be destroyed, right? The Earth was literally physically going to be destroyed by these races that had been created. And there's nothing bad.
Was this in the time of Atlantis, Lemuria?
Yes.
Yeah.
Atlantis and Lemurians, they stayed. There's confusion thinking that they were the ones that created this, and they were not. Lemurians and Atlanteans stayed in 5D. They didn't choose to move down. Really, picture what's happening right now, and it's very similar, right? We are choosing to either continue to move into these higher states, or we can choose to stay in the lower states, right? We can see this happening right now. It is exactly what happened millions of years ago. So the Lemurians and the Atlanteans were 5D humans, and they watched all of this unravel, and they couldn't, it was free will. And so they watched this unravel. They watched the human collective move down into these lower fields. They watched the humans begin to fight, have wars, massive wars that were like chemical warfare and just horrific stuff that was happening. But they stayed in 5D. And one of the, so there's universal laws that Earth and the Galactic Federation of Light created. One of the universal laws is that if the Earth is ever going to be physically destroyed, physically, like blown up, physically destroyed, they can come in and interfere. That's one of the only ways they can ever interfere. Otherwise, they let it play out. And around this time, maybe, I don't know, I mean, in terms of linear years, 50,000 years ago, 60,000 years ago, who knows, right? It all happened in a now moment. But after millions of years, these beautiful races were going to destroy the Earth through these wars. And so Earth had to make a decision to either clear out the entire Earth plane and begin again in 3D, or to let this unravel and let the experiment basically end, because her body would be destroyed, right? And the experiment would be over. And so what she chose for the Galactic Federation of Light to come in and clear out the Earth. And millions of human bodies and beings died because of this. The fifth dimensional Lemurians and Atlanteans saw it. They were aware. They were conscious. They knew it was happening. They prepared, right? They took a lot of things inside the Earth plane, right? Inside these portals. There's a lot of trauma if you were on the Earth plane at that time. Because you were a beautiful being experiencing a beautiful experience. And you had to watch it basically be dissolve, like done, right? And it was like, oh my God, this all just went away. And not only did it go away, but it moved into a 3D form. It moved into a third dimension, which anyone knows in that space that that's going to be horrific to move from 3D back up to 5D. That process the Earth and humanity was going to have to go through was heartbreaking for them, right? Super heartbreaking.
So this is the part I feel like I have some pieces of understanding with, like when that choice was made by Earth, and who knows exactly how it happened, meteors, whatever, but the floods came in, and maybe that's when Pangea started to break up into these different continents, and those that had the boats and chose to you know to be saved to start these next civilizations. It was like they broke up from these different high civilizations, and some went to Egypt, and some went to Mexico and the Mayan, and some went to the Aborigines in Australia. And it's like, then those cultures, it's like the essence of the higher consciousness was saved in those ancient cultures. And that's why it's so interesting. So many of them have pyramids, right? In like these
Yep.
different places. And I think I read a book once that the pyramids were to help store some sacred tools, or the Ark of the Covenant, or something that was like the sacred tools that was that connection to source. And okay, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, no, it's interesting your memories because you obviously had that experience. You obviously were a part of pulling. And I just had a conversation with a Patreon member that was an Atlantean, and she had the same. She was tapping into this memory she had of the floods, the destruction, all of it, the death, all of this happening. And she remembers taking really large crystals and like these really activated rocks, and moving them into the earth, uh, to hold that frequency and that consciousness. But these civilizations that you're speaking of, they, so from what I've been given, and this is only a little piece of it, and this either resonates or doesn't resonate, right? You can either be like, oh yeah, I believe that, or oh yeah, I don't, right? It's your choice. You get to choose. Thank God. So these civilizations started to appear on top of the earth plane. So Earth was in a 3D form. So these 5D consciousnesses had to move themselves literally into portals within the Earth until Earth was able to move herself into a frequency where these portals could then come on top of the land, right? So these fifth dimensional Lemurians and Atlanteans chose all kinds of places, just like you said, all over the earth plane, planted themselves in there and waited basically in that fifth dimensional field until the earth was holding a high enough frequency to be able to hold their consciousness. And that happened around 5, 6, 7,000 years ago. Earth was able to move herself into a pretty high frequency, and humanity. And it was at that time that these civilizations popped up. But what was also happening at the exact same time is that the galactic or light beings, higher consciousness beings, started to come down onto the physical earth plane with the third dimensional humans that were holding higher frequencies. So third dimensional humans were starting to hold higher frequencies. The Atlantean and Lemurian sort of activations that they were holding within the earth started to, like, these portals started to open. The third dimensional humans started to get pulled to these portals, and the galactics were finally able to come in because the earth was holding a high enough frequency, and they were able to physically bring themselves down onto the earth plane and assist these humans in creating these civilizations. They were created by light beings. They were created literally overnight, like in a now moment. They were created just like they were there and then they weren't there. All of them. It wasn't like a process, like 7 days later they were, no. It was like boom, boom. And they were holding zones, or they were places where the third dimensional human would learn. They were activated. They learned how to be 5D consciousness. They learned how to receive tools, abilities. They were learning. They were like schools. All of these places all over the world that were popping up, these civilizations, the human was being pulled energetically, and they were creating these beautiful places where the human was becoming that 5D human again. But the great thing about it was, back then, the light beings were actually able to move themselves down physically and be seen. They were able to move themselves into a vibration that they were coming in and out of dimensional fields. So the human could start to see them and then they would go away, see them and go away, right? It wasn't like they were standing there in a physical form like this. But at the same time that these higher light beings were able to come in, I'm not explaining all of it. There was a 5D field around the earth plane. When the earth was in a 3D, when she went back into a 3D form, because fourth dimensional races had been created in that 5D world, the Galactic Federation of Light put a fifth dimensional grid around the earth that basically protected her as she was moving back up to 5D. It protected her from fourth dimensional beings, because the fourth dimensional beings are what come in and create chaos, right? They're just like, oh my God, this is so much fun. You know, they get to do all this crazy stuff. So they created this grid around her. Well, around 5, 6, 7,000 years ago, when the earth was holding a high enough frequency and the human form was ready to really start going, like we're doing right now, they opened that grid up and they're like, all right, you guys come on in to the higher frequencies. You guys can actually enter in and participate. Well, when they do that, it's free will. So the fourth dimensional races came in. And in the now moment, they were like, oh, the Galactic Federation was like, oh shit, basically, not really, but it was like, oh shit. And they couldn't do anything, free will. So here comes these higher dimensional beings creating all of these amazing civilizations, all of these amazing portals on the earth plane, these holding zones, they basically called them. But at the same time, the 40 races came in, which are the ones that like to play with the human body, that like to play with 3D consciousness, that like to experiment, right? And it was literally like an OMG. So what started to happen over a couple hundred years is these light wars, basically these fourth dimensional races and beings started to overtake or destroy these really beautiful civilizations. And the light beings chose to step out while this played out, as opposed to fight. They don't know fight. They don't fight. They don't combat. They don't do that, right? They don't even know what that is. They just see it as free will. And so instead of continuing to create more civilizations only to be destroyed by these 4D races, they said, okay, we're going to exit and let this play out and then come back in. So right now is the now moment where they're coming back in again, right? But for thousands of horrific years, humans had to deal with these 4D races, thousands of years. And these civilizations, these spots, started to die almost or lose their potency. So 10 years ago, you might have gone to Egypt, right? And felt very different energy than you would now. They're starting to really turn on in ways that they haven't turned on in a long time. They really were kind of shut off for quite some time. I mean, you could still feel the energies and the activity that occurred on the land, but in terms of what it was actually holding, it was much more subtle for many years. And now it's starting to turn on again because these races have been pulled off the earth plane. But what we're remembering and what we're tapping into is like, oh my God, I remember being here. Oh my God, I remember working with these beings, or I remember creating this with them. I remember sitting in schools, so to speak, right? And I mean, they showed me this picture when I was in Machu Picchu. This is when it all came in. I was like, oh my God, what the freak? They literally showed me. I had no idea any of this, right? I was sitting in Machu Picchu and they were like, all this stuff, this information came in. They're like, we created this in a now moment. Our light craft would literally come right in front of where you are. And there's this big open grass. Have you been to Machu Picchu?
No, but I've seen lots of pictures.
There's like this big open grass area, right? And then these like large rock walls.
Yeah.
And they were like, our light ship would come down. We'd call in all of the humans, right? The humans would sit in this grass area. We would come down. And it was very hard for them to hold 3D consciousness. Really, really hard. So they wouldn't stay for very long. And, but they would come in, let's say time-wise, an hour of human time maybe, but it was a now moment. So it was a very long time maybe for that human, even though it was a now moment. And they would teach and they would show and they would activate and they would do all these things for the humans that were in this kind of civilization. But this was happening all over the place. And they were showing me how the 4D races found these civilizations. They found them. And it broke my freaking heart, because it was like, oh my God, they were destroyed. These humans were destroyed. They were killed. It was like massacres, which is why the Galactics left. But for hundreds of years, they were coming in and visiting, and they were coming in and teaching. And it's very much like what we're doing now, except that they're very cautious about how they are engaging with us. They are not as physically active as they were 5,000-6,000 years ago, but they are much more active now, and we are remembering our history of all of this, and really what we went through. I mean, you go back to the Atlantean and the Lemurian times, watching everything unravel, watching Earth go into 3D, recognizing what was happening, being a part of it for however many years that you came back in and incarnated. I mean, if you chose, imagine being an Atlantean 5D field, 5D form, freaking heaven on earth. You watch this beautiful consciousness descend. You exit out and you're kind of back into whatever consciousness you were. And then you're like, I guess I'm going to go back down and help out. Like, I think I'm going to help out. So then you drop into human form at some other now moment to help out, right? And let's say you helped out 5,000 years ago when they were coming in and everything was great and you were building these civilizations, and then all hell broke loose, right? And then, but you kept coming back in, you kept assisting. It's like, holy cow, like what we've gone through, you can't make it up. I mean, you can't, it's like, what? It's like a movie. And it all started, right? Like I said, Earth just wanted to go from 5 to 7. What's it like being in form? What's it like to shift? And all these other things played out. And people have a hard time wrapping their heads around that. They're like, well, why? Why would she choose this? Why would this happen? Why would we choose 3D? We didn't choose 3D. 3D happened. You chose to jump into body. You chose to jump in and help out. You chose to assist in all of this, right? From a higher consciousness. It's not like 3D is bad. It's not like pain is bad. Sadness, depression, anxiety, all of these things we're experiencing, it's not bad. It just is. It's just the dimensional field that we are moving out of. That's it. Right? And it's an uncomfortable one. But you're not saying, oh, I'm going to choose to go experience all these horrific things. It's bigger than that. It's not about what you're choosing. It's just the dimensional field. It's almost like you're going to a grocery store. You're not like, well, why is the grocery store in a line like this? And why are the soups up here? And why it just is. It just is, right? Third dimension is just like that. It's just third dimension. And the more you can see third dimension as just third dimension and not making it right, wrong, good, bad, the more you're able to surrender into your human journey. Like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just in third dimension. Like, I'm a rock star. I'm nailing this in all of my everything, right? Especially if you think back to everything we've gone through, right? And like the memories start popping up. You're like, oh my God, what the freak?
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yes.
It's crazy.
So we're in a moment where a lot of people are waking up to these ideas, the feeling that they came from somewhere else. And it can be a lot to look around at the world and to see the pain and to see the injustices and to see like politics and everything crumbling and falling apart. And sometimes I feel that feeling of like, wait, like I just want to go home. Like, why, what, do we have to go through this? And I also have the full awareness of like, yeah, I chose to be here and I'm here to be of service and to help. And how do we navigate that? Just like the, yes, we're here and we want to help, and like it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. It is a lot. I hear you. It is a lot. It is way more. It's way more than what I realized we were going to be going through. I really had no idea that this is what we were going to be going through. Like we were actually going to have to sit in this arena and watch all of this and feel all of this and see all of it and let our hearts break. And I mean, it can be debilitating. It can be overwhelming. It can be like you are you, I have like, it's, there's more. I'm going to have to go through more of this. I'm going to have, it can feel very overwhelming. So one of the things that works for me, because this is all perfect and this is exactly how it's designed to unravel, even though that's really hard for people to hold. It really is how we shift consciousness, and it really is what we're here to do, and it really is what's happening. It's a physical shift in a collective consciousness, which if you imagine a collective consciousness is just one big huge cloud, and it all starts to move into a different dimensional field or a different frequency. Let's just talk frequencies, right? So what we're watching and experiencing is really dense, heavy, unconscious, rising to the conscious, right? Stuff that we have been ignoring, denying, pretending, turning our backs on. It has to come up, just like our own internal process, right? And so there is a lot more that is going to come up. So the key is to recognize, is to remember as often as we can, okay, I am human and I am going to feel a lot of uncomfortableness and pain and sadness and whatever it is. And I also recognize that this is consciousness shifting. This is physics playing out. It looks physical because we're in 3D. So it's going to look physical. The riots, the murders, the traumas, the pedophile rings, the deep states, right? All these things are physical. But beyond the physical is a consciousness. Everything is consciousness. Everything is energy. And fortunately or unfortunately, we have to stand in the arena and watch this unconscious come to the surface so that it can be literally alchemized and shifted into light. And it's not a spiritual woo-woo thing. It's physics. It's just what's happening. And so you get to choose how you view it. And you're going to view it with many different lenses, because it can be very overwhelming. Like, can my body even take any more trauma? Can my body even take any, like, I mean, on the Galactic Federation of Light has showed me so much more of what's going to be unraveled, and we are preparing ourselves for it so that we can stand in the arena and navigate this to the best of our abilities. It's why we're here. But it does get better. It does. And there is amazing pockets of freaking heaven right now, right? So there is heaven on earth right now. We've already done so much work. And inside that same arena is massive chaos. It's all in one big arena. So for us, what are the tools that we need to be able to navigate this? How do I navigate my anxiety? How do I come back into my heart space? How do I have unconditional love for myself and others? How do I have empathy? How do I find peace? How do I find calm? Because the more we do this, the more we're going to want to say either one, I want out, I'm done, right? Or I'm ready, let's go, I've got this. So when the next thing unravels, we're more prepared, right? We got to remember, we're not, as much as we want to leave, we're here for a reason. right? We're here to shift this. We're here to stand in the arena together with our arms sort of like, like that Red Rover sends, so, they come. We're like, we've got it. We're like, all of us are standing, right, in this arena together all over the world. And more of us are waking up to this. And we're grabbing each other and saying, we can do this, right? And some days we're tore down and we're in tears. And some days we're like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's learning tools, I think.
Yeah. Do you think there will always be duality on Earth of like good, evil, or do you think, because I do believe we're shifting into this golden age and that like it might take a while, but things are going to be really beautiful when we are shifting and evolving into these higher consciousnesses. Is everyone going to come on that level, or is it going to still be just a slow evolvement?
Well, it'll be a slow evolvement. It's going to be a slow process. But what I can say from what I've been shown is, and what I've experienced is, we will start to find ourselves individually standing in externally, physically in 5D pockets, and also holding 5D consciousness more and more. And when we do that, we won't feel duality. And as we do that, as we start to experience non-duality in the arena where there's duality, more and more humans will start to get pulled to that frequency that you're holding, that I'm holding, that others are holding, right? While we're still in the arena where duality exists. So duality will be here for quite some time, but we are going to be experiencing now moments where we won't feel duality. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So will there be a time where no duality will exist on the earth plane? Yeah. I have no idea when that will be. In the meantime, we're in the arena where it all is existing, but we will start to experience non-duality more and more, not only internally, but externally. The earth we will be walking around and we'll feel the earth holding non-duality. We're going to see like these splits. You can almost start to see it happen now, right?
Yeah.
You can see splits happening. So you want to observe the splits, you guys. Like, when you look out, you're like, I'm wearing a mask, I'm not wearing a mask. Brilliant. Oh my God, that's polarity right there, right? So when you watch that, can you now practice non-duality, which is, one side, the other side. I may take a side, like I'm not wearing a mask, right? As a human 3D, I'm going to probably take a side. At the same time, though, can I also practice non-duality, which is I understand, I see both sides. Like I can understand both sides. Can I understand both sides? I'm not sure, right? Can I have empathy for both sides? I don't know. Let me practice. But you can at least see, there's polarity. Oh my God, there it is. And that is what we are unifying. We're actually unifying it as we see it split, right? That's how we unify it.
Yeah.
It's individual though. And then it becomes more collective.
And I am noticing how much more quickly we're able to choose something to focus on as a collective and then like all gather and take action on it. Like there's that evolution of consciousness of like, okay, we're all deciding this thing is important now, let's change it. And
it's happening faster now, it seems like, right? Like the momentum is much quicker. Everything is exponentially quickening. It's happening faster. So things are happening much faster, which is great. It's exciting, but it's also intense because more's popping up. So it's really important to sort of really be the observer as you're in it. You're in it and you're the observer, right? Because we're not ignoring it. We're not pretending it's not happening. We're not walking away from it, right? So you want to observe as much as you can as you're also in it, which is the challenge when you're waking up. You feel like you're going crazy, you know?
Yeah, and that's why we need people like you, just like offering the guidance. You're not crazy.
Yes,
Stay on the
not
path.
crazy.
Um,
Yeah.
can you tell us about your book and just like where it's at, when it's
Oh,
coming out, what's happening?
well, you know the process of writing a book. You wrote a
I
beautiful
do.
book. Oh my God, I
I
love it. It was
do.
so great. I loved your story. Um, it is written. So that's done.
Okay.
So it's been written. Now I am going through I am on my third round of edits because it came out like a vomit of just huge amounts of information, and I really had to clean it up. And it's really complex, and it's it's quite the experience. But I hope to have it sent off to some publishers when it's the divine time. But hopefully by the end of the year, I'll have it completely cleaned up so I can send it off to some publishers. I've had to really let go of controlling time,
Yeah.
um, and letting the book just birth in its own way. I guess that would be like if you were having, I've never birthed a child, but I would imagine it being the same thing. Like you can't force the child out until the child's ready. Um, So I know it'll be divine, and it will be received at the perfect time. Um, but man, oh man, oh man, oh man, holy, I mean, wow. It's a transformational process writing a book, right?
It is. Yeah. I think for me, the whole journey from idea to publication was 7 years, 17 years. So, and there was a lot of learning in there. And there was probably even a couple years of just putting it on the shelf and letting it gather dust. But yeah. And then once I fully committed and decided, it was maybe 2 or 3 years. Like it just came. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big journey. And so the theme of the book is about this kind of like alternative history.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the book came to me when I was sitting in Machu Picchu.
Mm.
I was driving up the bus. I was driving on the bus that takes you up. And all of a sudden, this massive download comes, and they were like, "This is going to be your book." And I'm like, "Oh my God, what are you talking about?" And then they started showing me in Machu Picchu a piece of the history of Earth, which I talked a little bit about. And I came home and I started to write the outline, and then it just started to come. So it's basically the how this whole experiment started, how they created DNA, how they created the body, how they created Earth, how we fell from grace down into 3D, how races were born and created, what the hybridization program was all about, how did they create hybrid races, how did they do abductions. There's a whole massive chapter too on abductions and what happened during that time frame, how they took these races off the Earth plane. Um, I mean, there's so much in this book. It could probably be 3 books, really.
Wow.
Um, but it's just the history from beginning to end, from the perspective of the Galactic Federation of Light. And it's not a perspective that everyone's going to hold. Lots of people are going to be like, "You've lost your freaking mind." And there's no freaking way any of this is true, right? Millions. But it's the perspective they gave me, and I'm here to write it for them. So I'm excited for it to get out when it gets out. Who knows? But I love that you asked about it. This might like it's my like
Yeah,
everything.
it feels relevant and it feels helpful for me just having context and understanding of where we've been and where we're going to greater understand this 3D to 5D higher consciousness ascension process we're in right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it does help because then you have a little bit of a bigger perspective of like, oh, okay, so all right, this kind of makes sense now. Like I'm not a screw up, but like this is all okay. Like, oh,
Yeah.
this is just I'm just doing my thing that I'm supposed to be doing. Um, every once in a while to get that sort of perspective kick in the ass, like, oh, okay, thank you, that helps, right? And then we dive back down into being in it all, and then we get that perspective again. It really helps. Like, it just helps. Um,
Yes.
you know, helps take the pressure off. We're not mess ups. We're not doing anything wrong, right? Everything is perfect, and everything you're experiencing is perfect. Everything you're going through is perfect. It's all perfect in all of the imperfection of it. You can't rush anything, you know, and I mean, they're always just saying, please remind the human of how freaking amazing they are, or the higher consciousness that you are, just how amazing you are, that you actually chose to drop into the human body, that you're actually here right now going through this, that you're awake, that your eyes are open, that you're moving, that you're taking one step in front of the other, that you're looking at all of the stuff you don't like to look at, that you're feeling everything you're feeling. Like, it's unbelievable. And that we beat ourselves up is the saddest thing, because there's nothing wrong with any of it, you know. And to remember that, and to feel that, and to hold that perspective as often as we can is so important. Like, you're such a precious gift. Like, all of you that are listening and watching, you're a precious gift. Like, and to be beating yourself up over any aspect of your human journey, it's just, it can stop, you know. You can practice allowing yourself to say, well, is that true? Let me see if I can settle into that. Because you dropped in, you came in, you courageously were like, I'm going to go in for the most heroic aspect of this entire shift, which is the physical shift. And you're doing it, and you're feeling it. Everything we're feeling, forget about it. And we wake up every morning, we open our eyes, and we say, let's go. Every morning, and we feel it. Stop beating ourselves up. Stop beating yourself up. Stop saying those things that you say. Start learning to look at you and honor you and love you and say, keep going, you rock star of a freaking high consciousness and human body. Whatever you're doing, even in addictions, even in behaviors where you're like, why am I still doing this? You're just in the human body experiencing the third dimensional human journey that you had. None of it's your fault. You're doing the best you can. Wrap your arms around yourself, even in those addictions. Wrap yourself around your arms around yourself, even in those behaviors you don't like. Wrap your arms around yourself when you are laying in bed and you can't get out. Can you wrap your arms around yourself? Can you love yourself in those moments? You know, I swear, there's so many times, Meredith, where I wish I could just bring the bean down and say, no, you tell them, like, you give it to them. Like, I want them to feel it from you. Because it just is it's such a beautiful reminder. It's not about bypassing, right? It's not about stepping out of the human and saying, I don't want to be in this experience. I don't want to be 3D. It's quite the opposite. It's like, oh, I get to hold all of these higher perspectives, the galactic beings, the angelic beings, all these different realms, and I get to stand in my human body and have all the other emotions around it, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. It's really needed at this time. Good reminder we all need. Yeah. And I want to encourage just anyone that's listening to you for the first time on the podcast or finding on YouTube, just to dive into your content. You're sharing videos very often of really uplifting and supportive content for these times. And is there anything else you want to share around just like what you're excited about, or how people can find you, or what's coming up, anything at all?
No, I just, I try to show up almost every day to give a message from the higher realms, just to assist us, and I do it on Instagram and Facebook. YouTube, I try to show, I try to show up on YouTube as often as I can with messages. Every month I do a journey with some of these light beings, and the journeys are out of this world, because I bring a beings into your space and we connect with them. And, again, it's not that we're bypassing the human experience. It's that we're integrating, we're opening, we're expanding, and remembering that we're so much more. So, you can find me on those places, and yeah, just be gentle with yourselves. Just be so gentle and compassionate. Um, we're doing it. That's why you're here. You're here to do this. And you get to have all your human emotions around it. You get to have all your human aspects and all your human beingness around it. But you're so much more. And there's so much more happening, beyond that third dimensional lens. Look past the third dimensional lens, right? Look past all the stuff that's coming up. Look past it and see that other piece. Oh, got it. Look past, right? Go past it.
Yes. Well, I think I'll just close there and take a moment for us to just feel into our bodies and our breath with just gratitude for everything that came through. So, if you'd like to just close your eyes and take it in, and anyone listening wants to just let it permeate into their cells, and just this message of, yeah, gentleness, compassion, how much we are doing, how much we tend to beat ourselves up, and just to let that go. So, just with so much gratitude for all the wisdom you shared with us today, Lori, and to everyone listening, showing up and being here and doing this great work, I bow. Namaste and thank you.
Thank you.